Hi, welcome to a tier list of the classes of Lord of the Rings Online. So in this video, I'm going to go through each class and I'm going to hop from the tier list web browser back into actual gameplay for reference. And I'm going to judge each class by 5 criteria. The fantasy of the class, how strong it is inspired by the lore, the role of the class, what is its job in the Lord of the Rings Online, the difficulty of the class, how easy is it to achieve the job of the class, the versatility of the class, how good is it at group content, solo content, and just doing what it needs to do, and fun, how fun is the class to play. So those are the 5 criteria I'm going to judge. So our first class here is the Beorning. So we're going to hop over to actual gameplay. So this is my Beorning. He's actually in Moria right now. He's a level 54, so he's not super high. Okay, so the Beorning, the lore of the Beorning is inspired by Bjorn in the Hobbit books. So the books describe him as being a skin changer, able to change into a bear, and his house was in the Wells of Langflood, right over in this area. And he guarded the path of the Misty Mountains, so he lived right in this area in the Wells of Langflood. He was a really cool character in the books. So the lore for a Beorning class in Lord of the Rings Online is solid A tier, so it gets a great rating for that. Now the role of Beorning, this is a very interesting class in Lord of the Rings Online because it can actually fulfill all 3 roles. You can be a tank in the hide and basically take lots of damage, very survivable, and lots of abilities to get the enemies to attack you. You can be a DPS melee in the claw, and that's what I'm spec'd into right now. And you can be a basically healing class in the roar. So the role is basically whatever you want to do. So I would say, like, if you're playing other classes, they only do DPS. The Beorning is not like that. The Beorning can fill any role and do it well. So it gets a super high rating for that as well. Now the difficulty. The Beorning is not, I would say, difficult. As long as... So I'm changing in and out of bear form. You need to know how to use bear form and when. And you need to know when to use man form and when. So for example, like on the red line, all of my bleeds, my damages over time, happen when I am in man form, and so I need to be in man form first to do a couple rotations because they're only castable when I'm in man form, and then I need to transform into bear form to like finish a different set of rotations. Now I haven't played the yellow line, but I have heard that it's very similar. You have to be in and out of man form and bear form, and I believe the blue line you're mostly going to be in blue line form. So I'd say it's about medium tier of difficulty. It's not the hardest class in the game, but you really need to be like, you need to have that narrowed down. So what I have on my mouse, I have a couple extra buttons, and I have hotkeyed macroed my man form and bear form so I can change really quickly. If you're not changing in and out of bear form, you're really going to mess up your rotation and not really be effective at the class. So the versatility, the Beorning gets an insanely high, probably the highest rating for versatility in the game because they can literally do everything at any time. They're amazing at solo because they're tanky, they wear heavy armor, they can make their own food, as I'm showing here in the Beorning's honey cakes, so they can basically be a cook anywhere without having to learn the profession. They can survive a tremendous amount of damage. They have healing. They have good DPS. One of my favorite things about the Beorning is they have this Wonderless ability where I can literally select this and I can get a humongous speed increase. So the last criteria is the Beorning fun? And I love playing Beorning. I think it gets a super high rating for that. Sometimes I get a little bored of just melee, so I think the only demerit I can give to the Beorning class is that it's all basically melee. So because of that, we're going to hop back over here. We're going to put the Beorning in an amazing category because it is an amazing class. Alright, our next class on our tier list is the Brawler. So the Brawler is not the newest class to be added as of this particular video. It's the second to newest, so it's pretty new in terms of the game's history. So we're going to hop over here on the Brawler. So I am on a low level, 34. This is the highest level Brawler I have. So the lore of the Brawler, they are inspired by Helm Hammerhand, the famous Rohanian king who defended from the Dunlendings and Eastlings, and he was famous for punching people. And he's in the lore, so he's a figure, and that's also why Helm's Deep is named after Helm Hammerhand. So the lore for him is great, very, very on par. The role is kind of weird. This is one of the few classes that don't actually have three lines. They can either go in the Fulcrum, which is the blue line, or they can go into the Maelstrom DPS. So they can be a tank or DPS. And then the yellow line is used to supplement whatever you're wanting to buff, either your defenses or your damaged abilities. Now, their resource actually is a thing called metal. And so you have metal builders and metal spenders, and it's basically this energy bar that fills up. The difficulty of the Brawler, they're really easy to play. They're very rewarding to play. I will say there is a lot of abilities, and sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming to understand how it all works. But it just works, if that makes sense. So I think difficulty-wise, it's I'd say middle of the road. Where it gets difficult is being able to survive, being able to do the right combinations and the right rotation, and then being able to pop your survivability skills to stay alive. And the reason that's a problem is they don't have any healing. If you go into here into the red line, I'm not an expert on the yellow or blue line because this isn't a high level yet, but thus far, the only thing you can do is do Latent Light, and you have a 25% to proc a healing ability, and you can spec into that higher. You can be up to 50%. And basically any metal spending abilities. So basically at the end of your rotation, if you're using a big metal spending, you might get a healing. But I've discovered, as I'm progressing this character, the difficulty comes and you die very easily when things get overwhelming. Now they do wear heavy metal, so they're not squishy. They just can't survive like a Guardian or a Beorning would. And even to some extent a champion. They have less healing than a champion. Now the versatility. The red line does amazing damage. They just kill things quick. So I've really enjoyed the red line. They're really great for that. And I'm not sure about the blue line. I haven't done much of it, but I've done some research, and the blue line is a very reliable, good tank, especially in group settings. It's pretty sought after, actually. So, versatility, I think it gets a good rating on that. And then fun. Is the Brawler a fun class to play? And I will say in the red line, I love it. I love playing the Brawler. It's just very rewarding to just punch the crap out of stuff. And things just die. So that's really, really fun. Also, they do have one ranged ability where they throw a mug, which is ridiculous. Oh. Well, I mean, that took half health. Now these are a little lower open world mobs, so. But I think the Brawler is a blast. I think the best thing about the Brawler is it's very fun. It feels very polished and easy. The rotation just feels great. All right, with all that information, we're gonna do the Brawler. It's not an amazing class because it has healing problems. It only has 2 specs and doesn't have any ranged. So you're gonna get, at least I get bored of just doing melee, right? I don't think it's as bad as good. I think it's a great, like maybe a low great. I would say it's in a great category. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just not the best class in the game, in my opinion. Okay, the next class on our tier list is the Burglar. So the Burglar is inspired by Bilbo Baggins, being the famous burglar from the Hobbit book that was hired to steal the treasure from Smaug the dragon. So right away, we have an excellent, top-notch class fantasy high ranking, because Bilbo is an amazing character in the books, and this class fulfills that role wonderfully. So the role being, you are the rogue of the Lord of the Rings Online. You are the sneaky sneak. You are the you can pickpocket, you can sneak in and out, and actually you are the only class in the game that actually can stealth. So you fulfill the role great. You're kind of a utility class. Now, if you're doing group content, they have these things called fellowship maneuvers, and they can actually really help their allies, so that's kind of cool too. They're kind of a hybrid class in that regard. So you have the blue line, which is the gambler, and they are more spec'd into survivability. They're able to survive more, do a little bit of healing. And then the quiet knife is just all raw damage. And then the mischief maker is kind of a strange class that I'm not exactly sure how to play. It's somewhere in between. So the role is very interesting. You're there to help buff your allies and do really good damage. But I would say in the open world, being able to sneak past enemies is super, super awesome. So I'm going to kind of show you that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about as I sneak over here is difficulty. Well, I alerted them. So difficulty, is the Burglar hard to play? And I would say yes, it is. Because you are a leather wearer, you're a little bit squishy. Oh, dragon was super loud. You're a little bit squishy. So you have to be kind of cautious of what you're getting into. And then the blue line does have some healing. The red line does not. The red line's, if you get in over your head, you're kind of dead, unfortunately. So I would say it's a definitely hard class to play, because you really need to... I stepped in the fire. I'm putting on a really bad show, for example. But I don't main Burglar. I only play it sometimes. Okay. Now, is it versatile? Basically, no. It gets a low rating on the versatility category, because you're only going to be doing one thing, and you're going to be going into stealth, sneaking up on bosses or big targets and bursting them down, going back into stealth and getting out of there. So the playstyle is like exactly the same. You're not going to be healing, you're not going to be tanking, you're just going to be doing that. So it gets a low rating in that. Where I think it does shine is in this case where I have to kill this dragon. If I had done it correctly, I could sneak past everybody and target this dragon. Take him out, go back into stealth, and just leave the instance. So this is a huge benefit to this class, because no other class in the game can bypass trash, get to an objective, and then get back. That's really, really cool for the Burglar. So the last category is the Burglar fun. And I will say this is only a level 34. And I would say it's taken me to get to level 30 to start enjoying the Burglar. It is a difficult class to enjoy at a low level. Once you get into higher levels and you have more things to do, it makes more sense and it's starting to get more fun. It kind of depends on your playstyle. I'm not really one that likes to sneak around. As you can see, I'm not also very good at it. But I like the occasional difference in it is to sneak around the world of Middle-earth. So I think I'd put it on the middle tier of fun. So that means going back to our tier list, I think it's a good class. It's kind of middle of the road for me. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's like the worst class in the game. Alright, the next class on our list is the Captain. Hopping on to the actual game, this is my Captain. He is still a level 35. He's a low level. So the Captain is inspired by characters in Lord of the Rings like Aragorn and Boromir. Characters that rally allies around them. So the fantasy is definitely there and needed. And the class does feel like a supporty, buffy your allies kind of class. Now, the role is just that you're kind of more of a aid to your fellowship. So the captain, by design, is really supposed to be with other people. And as a result, it kind of loses something when it's by itself. Now, they've done a lot of work with the red line, the DPS spec. Now, it's interesting because this is another class where you can be a healer, a tank, or a DPS, similar to the Beorning. So that has a lot going for it. You're never going to be bored playing a captain because you could always switch up your playstyle. If you wanted to tank, you could go into the yellow line, leader of men. If you wanted to heal, you could be the hands of healing. Now, I've only played the red line, so I can't speak into the other specs. I've heard people that play yellow line captain are think it's a blast. So maybe when I play the character more, I might do that. Haven't heard much about the healing, but overall, the difficulty, it's kind of a difficult class to play even at this level, which is why I don't play it a whole lot, because you have to manage your companion, your summonable. Now, you can summon several different things, at least in Redline, and then you have to buff them. So there's a lot of that, and then there's a whole top bar here of abilities that you want to select your guy to be doing. So that's kind of interesting. They also do light type damage and cries and calls, so they're kind of like similar to the Minstral. So that's kind of interesting. Now, versatility, they are an incredibly versatile class, being able to do all three roles like I mentioned. And that's kind of rare for Lord of the Rings Online. So they definitely have that going for them in a really positive way. And then fun. Is the captain fun? I think the idea of being a support buffing class is really, really fun. On like paper and conceptually, I would say yes, they are fun, in theory. However, they suffer a problem similar to the Wardens in that what they do, okay, selecting 4 or 5 buttons, other classes do better hitting 1 button. If that makes sense. They're not bad, but it's just like, I don't know, it's just like, well, I could do this easier with another class. So, I don't know if that's fair to judge, because again, you gotta keep in mind that the captain is really designed around the philosophy of helping your fellowship. So, because of that, I think the captain it's okay. If you're playing a lot of group content, from what I understand, captain is like amazing because it'll buff your, it'll buff your allies and you want it because you can summon your allies and you can buff them and you can heal them, all that really great stuff. So I don't think, for me though, in my playstyle, I think it's okay. Alright, the next class on our list is the champion. So popping on the game onto a champion. This guy's level 53, he's in Moria. So the champion, the lore, is inspired by characters like Gimli in the Fellowship. Kind of a dual-wielding, heavy-armored brawler, just getting in there and doing lots of damage. So this is one of the original classes in the game, and probably one of the easiest and kind of the quintessential warrior class that you find in basically every MMORPG. That's the champion. So its role is just that. It does good damage. Very reliable, solid DPS damage. So the red line Berserker is more single target focused, heavy hitting abilities, and the yellow line is more AoE focused in hitting multiple targets. And the blue line is more focused into tanking. Now, they're not really supposed to tank, from what I understand. I have not played... This is the highest level champion I have. I haven't played blue line. My favorite is Yellow Line by far. Yellow Line is an absolute blast. So difficulty, they are probably the easiest class in the game to play. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are easy or beginner level, but they're just very straightforward. It just makes sense. All the abilities work. They're heavy hitting. They're hard hitting. That feels good. It feels polished. The animations look really good. It's just a class that works really well. It does really good, clean, honest work, right? So, versatility. They are not very versatile. They really only are designed to get in there and be the barbarian. They don't really fulfill any other role. They don't really do anything else. They struggle in healing. They struggle in range. You're not going to support your allies really much with anything other than you're just going to kill things quick. You're not going to be able to tank very well. I mean, they have some taunts and they have some abilities for damage mitigation and such, but they're not really designed for that. They're designed to be in there and kind of be the meat grinder, right? So, and then the last category, fun. I think the champion is an absolute blast. Any other downsides and like versatility or any of that, I think just gets overshadowed by just how fun they are. Now, maybe one downside of the class is like, it's just melee. And so you're going to be meleeing the whole time, you're going to be doing DPS the whole time. But I'm pretty sure the champion is the most played class in the game, maybe next to the hunter. And I think with good reason. They're just a blast to play. So because of that, I'm going to put champion at amazing, because the Yellow Line spec and champion is one of my favorite things to play in the Lord of the Rings Online. Alright, the next class on our list is the Guardian. So the Guardian is a unique class in that it's really designed to be the main tank of the game. And it's one of the original classes, and from the beginning, it was designed to be the tank, right? So it's the lore involved in it. Surprisingly, it's inspired by Sam Gamgee, because the idea behind being the tank is like you're putting yourself in between the enemy and your allies, and you're extremely loyal and you know, self-sacrificial in a way. So the fantasy is pretty interesting. You know, you can't help but like the Guardian just in like how they're designed for that purpose. But so the role is just that you're kind of supposed to be the main tank. Now they do have a damage spec in the Keen Blade, the red line, which is what I'm spec'd into now. And they're another one of the class like the Brawler and the Warden, where the yellow line is here for you to sort of benefit whatever thing you want to do. It's not really a spec you spec into, if that makes sense. You either are going to spec into tank or into red line, the DPS. So the difficulty, surprisingly, they're easy to just like get at a basic level, but they do a lot of parry response things and like combos. So you'll get in there and you'll set up a couple hits, and then you have to parry response to unlock other hard-hitting abilities. So I wouldn't say they're difficult, but it's not a class that you can just kind of mind it. You kind of have to think a little bit about it. It's a lot harder than the champion, I would say, in its rotation. Now, they are a lot more tankier than a champion. They are very, very survivable. So if you were going to be doing soloing, the Guardian is going to be excellent for solo content. And this is basically my main character, my highest level character for that very reason. It's just really easy to just pretty much do everything. You're kind of just a sharp tool in that regard. So versatility, they're extremely versatile. They have a lot of healing abilities, they had a lot of damage mitigation, and they have decent damage in the red line. So they really do everything pretty well. They're a really good middle-of-the-road class. And so I would highly recommend, if you are going to be a solo player or a new player to Lotro, highly recommend the Guardian. It's really... And then finally, the criteria is fun. I think the Guardian is fun. I'm able to level 150, and I really haven't gotten bored of this class at all. I still really enjoy this class, but I'm also not looking at it with rose-colored glasses and thinking that it's the best class in the game. It just happens to be one of my favorite. So, I think if you were going to be doing a tier list on what's the best tank, I think it would be amazing. Just because they are so survivable and tanky, but because they don't do the best damage, and they either do damage or healing, like if you're thinking about playing 150 levels, it might get a little boring. Whereas the champion is really, really fun, and you can kind of switch up your playstyle. You can't really do that with a Guardian. You're really stuck in your rotation the whole way. So I think because of that, the Guardian is a great class. I think it's comparable with the Brawler. It fills a similar niche as the Brawler, and it only has 2 specs like the Brawler. But I think it's better than the Brawler because it has a lot more survivability and healing. So the next class on the list is the Hunter. So this is that kind of quintessential ranged class in the Lord of the Rings Online. Now, the Hunter does not summon pets like it does in like a game like World of Warcraft. It actually is just solo. It's just a bow casting damage dealer. So the lore on the Hunter is obviously inspired by Legolas from the Fellowship. And the lore is really good there. The class fantasy is really good. You really do feel like an archer just kind of pumping good damage. So that would be the role, is they are all 100% damage dealers. They are that ranged physical damage, and they do really, really good damage. So the Bowmaster is the typical damage dealer in that you're going to be holding still. You're basically like a tower shooting arrows, and you're going to be doing really, really good single target damage. The Trapper of Foes is more of utility, like trapping and slowing and snaring people. It's kind of a weird playstyle. It doesn't feel great in the yellow line. Yellow line is very odd. But the blue line is, I think, one of my favorite specs in the game, because you're basically a range dealer, but you can move while firing on every ability. And this just makes for such a smooth, fun playstyle where I can just be running around, tagging mobs, moving on to the next mob. It just feels so efficient and streamlined. And I really like this barbed arrow ability, where I can hit him with a bleed and then just be running on, moving along, and while I'm running, this guy's dying, right? So I love that about the blue line. The difficulty, they're not really a hard class to play. They're kind of similar to the champion in that they're a very easy class to pick up. It just makes sense, and their abilities just do good. It's a class that does really good work. It's consistent. It's not like hard to understand or convoluted. Now, obviously, you can make it more difficult. And you can be like, expert at any class and be really, really good and min-max it. But overall, the difficulty is not bad. Versatility, they're really only here to do range damage. They're not going to be able to tank much. Well, they're really not designed for tanking at all, so they're squishy. So the idea in the red line is kill them before they get to you. And the idea with the blue line is kite them and run away. And the yellow line is like try to slow them down, right? Because if mobs are getting to you, especially at higher levels, you're probably going to die. So they're really not versatile. That would be their weakness. They don't have a whole lot of healing. They do, when you spec into later levels, this guy's 105, I think, 108. There is quite a bit of healing at your disposable. But in early levels, it's really not there. And I remember this guy, like especially when I got into the 40s in Angmar, was pretty difficult on a hunter if you were solo leveling. So then, are they fun? I think the hunter's a blast, especially the blue line. And I will say, if you are a player that's going to be just playing in the landscape, so solo playing through the main quest line, the hunter is undoubtedly the best class for that, because they get the awesome travel abilities. On top of, you have Find the Path, which is a movement speed increase, like the Beorning. That's just like when you're out of combat, you can just run super fast. They have all these amazing travel abilities that you can basically like free millstones to places. And then one of my favorite things is Return to Camp. You'll find camps throughout the landscape that you can make your basically second millstone. So they really fulfill that kind of, I've heard them called the taxi service in Middle-earth. They really fulfill that role. They're a really, really fantastic class. One of my favorites in the game. So because of that, because of the blue line, you'll see a pattern here. I think the classes that I enjoy the most are going to get the higher rating. Alright, the next class on our list is the Lore Master. So the Lore Master in like the canon fantasy of the class is clearly inspired by Gandalf. So you're like that wizard inspired by Gandalf. You can actually have a sword and a staff, which is really cool. You're kind of the elemental wielder in Middle-earth. So the role is you're going to be... The role is pretty versatile. So there is the damage dealer in the Master of Nature's Fury. So you're going to be doing a lot of lightning and fire damage. And the red line is fantastic. Does amazing damage. And the Ancient Master in the yellow line is going to be a support class. Now, I believe it does a lot of healing. This is more of the class, the spec you'll be playing if you're in big groups and like raids and stuff. From what I understand, at the top tier level, a yellow line Lore Master is almost a guarantee. And then you have the Keeper of Animals, which is more of the survivability spec, because the Keeper of Animals is you can summon a ton of, well, animals. So you can summon bears, cats, birds, etc. So they're really kind of the summonable class in the game. They're more of that than the Captain was. It used to be that the Lore Master could always have a pet out, so you can have your bear out to tank. So because of that, they have a lot of advantages that other classes do not have. So difficulty, is the Lore Master difficult to play? And I would say yes. They have a ton of abilities. They have a ton of rotations. Sometimes I'm not quite sure if my rotation is correct. I kind of do what works. But at least in the red line at level 65, there's a lot of procs and things that if you get critical hits, it like opens up different abilities. So if I use Gust of Wind, for example, it will change... Oh, I'm sorry, if I use Nature's Fury, it will change these two abilities to like Burning Gate or low pressure attack. So there's a lot of things like that, just little nuanced things. I don't necessarily need to get into that. I think I made a video on the Red Line Lore Master more in depth. Versatility. They are an incredibly versatile class and doing very, very good range DPS. Very good. They can spec into the blue line for a lot of survivability. There have been times on this character that I was doing like solo instances, and on the red line I really struggled, died, and then I'm like, okay, I'll spec into the blue line, and then pulled my tank out, my bear tank, and just did really well in that scenario. So I think it's a very, very versatile, fun class. You're never probably ever going to get bored of playing a Lore Master, and so if you're looking for a class that's just really good throughout the entire game, the Lore Master is going to be really good for that. And then fun. I think it is a super fun class to play. You feel like they nail the fantasy, and you feel like Gandalf. And it just, I haven't really come across a problem that the lore master couldn't solve. So I really, really like pretty much everything about the lore. They even do good melee damage. So they're kind of the reverse of a lot of these melee damages, where classes were like the Guardian or the Champion, they don't have any ranged ability. That's not really the case with the Lore Master, because they actually have some good melee abilities with their staff sweeps and stuff. Oops, we're gonna go put the Lore Master in. My gut reaction is to put it in Amazing. There's really nothing wrong with it, but I don't think it's like the best class in the game. It's definitely up there. I think it's comparable to the Beorning. It's an excellent class. Not really a whole lot of weaknesses. It's super fun to play. It's good in groups. It's good in solo. All right, the next class is the Minstral. So I have a Minstral. He's level 36, but honestly, this is the class I probably know the least amount of. But I would say, for all the classes, if you can play it to level 20, I think you have a pretty good understanding of what the class is supposed to be doing. So the fantasy, I think, is supposed to be from Elbereth or Luthien. So obviously there are minstrels in the lore and in the books. They use music to buff their allies, heal their allies, and destroy their enemies, right? So they have the Red Lion, the Warrior Scald. It does pretty good damage. It's very survivable. So the role of the Minstrel is primarily you're a healer, and I think you're the quintessential healer, essentially. Like, they shipped originally with the game, and I think the main healers in Lord of the Rings Online is Minstral, Rune-Keeper, and then it's Beorning, and then it's Captain, right? Oh, probably Captain before Beorning. So that's primarily what they're here to do, is heal. So if you are in the blue line, you're going to be doing shields and healing, and if you're the yellow line, you're going to be doing like buffs to your allies. So difficulty, they're really not a difficult class to play, but there is some interesting nuances in the cries, calls, and kodos. And so in your traits, you will want to spec that accordingly. Versatility, they're really a range class focused more on healing. So I know they have like stances where they can do more damage or more healing. I'm just not real versed on this class. But I will say they're enjoyable. Versatility, I think they gets a downgrade because you're kind of doing one thing the whole time. As you can see, I will say it's interesting to have a range class. They wear light armor, but they have shields. So that's kind of cool, and they actually have a unique shield called a light shield. So there's a Warden shield, and there's a light shield, and there's a heavy shield. So that's quite interesting. Now, on the last thing on the fun category is the Minstral fun. I think the Minstral is really fun. It's kind of fun to run around and play instruments like I'm doing, as you can see. And they do pretty good honest work. They're a little on the squishy side. They can do a little bit of melee damage. That's kind of unique as well for a range class, because he has a shield and a sword. So that can be fun at times, but as you can see, my health's pretty much down. But they have a lot of tools at their disposal. Now, my opinion might change as I get more levels, because maybe I get more abilities and things get a little bit more interesting. But for the most part, it's just not a class I'm going to be gravitating towards. Now, I think it suffers similarly for me as the, sorry if I said that word wrong, similar as the Captain, in that I think this class is designed to be played with other people. And so I don't really play with other people, I play solo. So I think, unfortunately, I'm going to grade the Minstrel a little bit lower than probably it deserves. Again, like if I was if you were a player and you're like, I want to play a class that's going to support other people, I would recommend the Captain and the Minstral, like right away. But because I'm not doing that, the core built around the Captain and the Minstral kind of loses something for me. So I would put the Minstral in good. I think it's good. Alright, so the next class on our list is the Rune-Keeper. So the Rune-Keeper is inspired by Celebrimbor, the greatest smith of the Second Age. So he is responsible for making the Rings of Power. So the class fantasy is already well established, very interesting. And this class is extremely unique in that it has a balance attunement system where the more you use damage abilities, the harder hitting your abilities will be on this graph of attunement, and the more healing abilities you use, the bigger heavy hitting healing you can do. So quite fascinating, and I will say, a very enjoyable way of doing a class resource system. So the role of the Rune-Keeper is also interesting because they can be a really good healer in the blue line. They can be a kind of standing still, flame-throwing turret DPS in the red line and the cleansing flame. And what my preferred playstyle for the Rune-Keeper is the Solitary Thunder, and it fills a similar role to the Blue Hunter in that it can be basically quick-moving, quick attacks on the go. So this is probably one of my favorite go-to classes in the game. If I'm wanting to just have a blast playing Lord of the Rings online, I'm going to be playing really 3 classes, maybe 4 classes. The Yellow Line Rune-Keeper, this class, the Blue Line Hunter, the Yellow Line Champion, and maybe the Red Line Beorning. So difficulty. Is the Rune-Keeper difficult to play? For what I do, I think no. You're going to want to just focus on your attunements. When they get to full, then you're going to be hitting your epic conclusions and your shocking words to do like massive damage. And then when you bite off more than you can chew, you're about ready to die, you have a bubble that you can use, and you have some healing. So it's a really, really forgiving class, I feel like. And you just do such good damage that things die, and you don't usually get in trouble. And I would say it's very versatile for that reason. It's a range casting class that wears cloth, so it's technically squishy. But you have so many tools in your pocket that you can just kind of deal with stuff. I love it. It even has a good stun in vivid imagery. And then finally, fun. Is the Rune-Keeper a fun class to play? And as I said earlier, it's pretty much my top 3 class in the game if I'm playing Yellow Line. Now I will say I have played the Red Line a little bit, and the Red Line is fun too. And I think the Red Line is more to be like instances where you're just going to be pumping really, really good DPS. And so the Yellow Line, I think, is more for the open world, traveling around and about. Really, the only downside to the Rune-Keeper that I can think is there's not really any movement speed increases. So the Hunter has an edge in that regard, and so does the Beorning. So because of that, I think the Rune-Keeper, I think it's definitely an amazing class. I don't think it's as good as the Hunter, because the Hunter... the Rune-Keeper has better healing than the Hunter, but the Hunter has movement speed. So the Rune-Keeper can feel really, really slow sometimes. And that's actually, now that I think about it, also a problem with the Lore Master. Is it's very slow. It doesn't have any movement speed increases. So I think I like the Hunter the best because it has movement speed, healing, good damage, and it's fun. And then the Beorning, I think after that, because it has basically everything you need. It's an amazing class. The Champion does have a sprint, but it's on a long cooldown. And then I think the Rune-Keeper is actually better than the Lore Master. Alright, our final class is the Warden. Now the Warden is probably the most unique class in the Lord of the Rings Online, and I would say even in the genre of the RPG MMO, right? And the reason is they have a very interesting thing called the Gambit system, and you're basically like playing a fighting game where you have to hit 3 combos of keys to unlock the heavy hitting combo, right? So it's like you're playing like Soul Calibur or like Mortal Kombat or something in the way it plays. So the lore for the Warden is, I think it's inspired by Haldir, who is a Warden of Lothlorien in the books, and I think also Gil-galad. They also are very unique in that they use spears and javelins. Very, very interesting weapons. So that's really neat. The role is they're going to be another one of those classes like the Guardian and the Brawler, where they're either going to spec into the red line for DPS or the blue line for determination, and then your yellow line is more to supplement the blue or red. So they're going to fulfill tank role or damage role. Now, from what I understand, the tank role isn't the best. So, I don't know, it's kind of an odd class. On paper, the idea of this Gambit system, like yellow, green, red to unlock thing, sounds awesome. The idea behind it is great. However, the execution of it in person just feels bad. And I've heard people say, if you want to get good at Warden, you have to only do Warden. So I just messed up that royally, that Gambit system. If you want to be really good at Warden, you need to play a lot of Warden. And I think that is accurate, because the reason that makes it so complicated is you have 3 abilities, and there's, how many different choices you can make to unlock additional abilities. So here's all the gambits right here. These are all the combinations. How many? What is that, like 50? So it's very unique, but the problem is you have to remember these things. Now you can get on here and refresh your memory, but there's a flow to the Warden. Like you need to open up with this ability and then open up with that. So like in order to heal yourself, you have to do combos. So the next criteria I'm judging it by is difficulty. This class is extremely hard to play. So say like I'm tanking and I need to taunt enemies that are running and attacking my allies. Well, I'll literally need to hit 4 buttons in order to get a taunt. Whereas if I'm playing on a Guardian, I hit 1 button and I can taunt, right? Now you can do this thing called battle preparation where you like fill your bar ahead of time. So if I do this, like battle preparation, you get some tools that kind of help you out, and then I can generate the combo before I get into combat. That's kind of nice. Now versatility, they get a huge buff into versatility because they can have ranged in their javelin. You can switch your stances. So right now I'm in melee stance, and I can switch to range stance. So I think that's awesome. So you can be kind of like a hunter, and they wear medium, so they're similar to a hunter, and they actually have speed like a hunter as well. Or you can switch to doing melee, and they get different stats and different buffs on the particular stance they're in. So a lot of times you can be into range stance, throw a bunch of javelins and spears, start some bleeds, and then run all the mobs around a corner, and then switch to your melee stance. And that's awesome. And that kind of plays into the last category I will judge it, is it fun? I think the Warden is really fun. I think the concept of these combo points and being able to switch to ranged and melee is really, really good. And I will say, if you're a player who's wanting a challenge and looking for not being bored in the game, the Warden is going to be for you, because it is not a boring class at all. There's so many cool things you can do with it. But if you're a player that's looking for an easy, you're going to turn on a show and play Lord of the Rings online and not have to pay attention, man, the Warden is not going to be for you because you really have to pay attention. And so that's kind of my final nail in the coffin, is when I play video games, I want them to be relaxing, not frustrating. And whenever I play the Warden, it feels like I'm learning a job. Like, it feels like I have to memorize a bunch of stuff, I have to pay attention, and if I'm not doing everything correctly, I'm like failing. So because of that, I think it's the worst class in the game for me. This coming from a primarily solo playing character. So our next class on the list is the Mariner, and I ended up having to do a new list because I realized the Mariner wasn't on it. So the Mariner is the newest class to be added to the Lord of the Rings Online. Now, the Mariner is a very unique class. The lore of it is inspired by Elrondil, who was Elrond's father, who was a mariner, and this was introduced in the Corsairs of Umpar expansion. And so it has a lot of maritime inspiration in it. Pirates, on ships. So it has a lot of really unique things in the fantasy of the class. I think it has a strong basis in the Lord of the Rings Online. So the role of the Mariner is also kind of strange, and you have really good DPS in the Duelist, and the Rover, not really sure in the Yellow Line. This is the class I've played the least, and from what I understand, the Shanty Caller is more of a support kind of class. Now, what makes the Mariner interesting is it has a sort of attunement system like the Rune-Keeper, but rather than filling up your bar all the way to do higher damage, this bar is called Balance. And the Rune-Keeper, or the Mariner, you have to keep the bar in the middle. So it's a similar vibe as the Rune-Keeper, but if you fill the bar too far to the right or to the left, it actually stuns you. So this class is kind of weird in that it's like a glass cannon, where it can do really, really good damage, but it's also very punishing. So the difficulty is pretty high on this class. I think this is probably the third most difficult class in the game, along with Lore Master and the Warden, because this is a very punishing system. And there's a lot of abilities, as you can see. I'm on level 20. I'm only 29. There's a ton of abilities. So some of your abilities will build your balance to the right, and some abilities will kind of neutralize your balance. And you have some abilities to kind of recenter. But it's kind of reactive play, similar to the Guardian as well. And I've heard someone compare
Could I speak with you a moment?
the Mariner as a sort of hybrid between the Burglar and the Minstral. And I think that's an accurate assessment with the resource system of the Rune-Keeper. So you add all that together and you get the Mariner. So the versatility, its main job is to do damage, and it does it really well. So some really standout things in the red line is you can kind of just melee stuff, and if things are in front of you, you're going to be doing really good single target damage. And as you can see, I'm able to do AoE damage as well, just as sort of using my passive abilities. So that's actually really, really interesting and quite fun, and does a surprising good amount of damage. But it doesn't do a lot of healing, at least in the early levels. Now the blue line I think is also designed to support and fellowships, but from what I understand at higher levels, it kind of competes in the spot for a captain, whereas like the buffs you get from a captain, if you have a Mariner, you're kind of going to be doing the same spot. So I think the worst thing about the Mariner is its role in the game and in the fellowship, because it doesn't do like significant. It probably does better damage than a Burglar, but it's not going to be more helpful to your fellowship than a Burglar is. And it does similar things like a captain, but it's not necessarily going to be doing better things than a captain. And from what I understand, everyone that has like a higher level mariner, that's the problem, is trying to fit in within the confines of the game to be helpful. So it has a little bit of an identity crisis in terms of its role, and that could be changed with some patches and some, updates to the class. Now, the last criteria we'll judge you by is it fun. And I think it's really, really fun to be on the red line because things die really, really well. Like, you just do really good damage, and it has some really cool, fun abilities, and I actually really enjoy this balance system. So I think probably the best thing going for the Mariner is the lore and the fun in playing it. So I think if we were judging it on its role in a fellowship, I think it's going to be probably the bottom of the barrel because it's kind of weird in that regard. But if I was going to judge it on solo play, I think it feels a lot more fun than the captain or the warden, and so I think it's a good class. I think it's below the minstrel. Okay, so some final thoughts on the tier list. So as I was looking at it, I think the Yellow Line Rune-Keeper is significantly better than the Lore Master. And the reason being is the Rune-Keeper doesn't have any speed movement increases, but the Yellow Line makes it very fast class. And the Lore Master has really no movement speed increases. They do have some quick casting abilities, but they're not as heavy hitting as the Rune-Keeper. So I think the Lore Master has to be the top of great. It's a really, really good class. It's really difficult to play, and in a group setting, it's hard to pull off. And I just don't think it's as good as the Rune-Keeper. And then the other thing I think I need to change is the Burglar and the Minstral. The Minstral is more versatile, more survivable, and better at filling the roles in the game. So I think the Minstrel is the highest of the goods for me. Now, some other things to point out. I ranked this mostly from a solo in the landscape experience. And as you can see, I rank highly the classes that have mobility, have sustain, and have travel increase abilities. So the Hunter is obviously an amazing class because it has speed boosts. The blue line is super fast, very soloable, and it has all the travel points. So the Hunter, I think, is my favorite. And as a side note, if you are a free-to-play account, the Hunter is probably going to be the best choice for you because you'll be able to traverse the whole world just by playing the game. Because when you get into free-to-play, you're not able to travel everywhere like a VIP would. And so having these quick travel points on a Hunter is like humongous impact. So in a similar vein, I think that's why I also really like the Beorning, because they have a ton of movement speed. They're really fun. The changing back and forth from skin changer to man form is really interesting. And if you get bored just doing DPS, you can hop on tank or you can hop on healing. And I really like Rune-Keeper, especially the yellow line, because it fills a very similar niche as the blue line Hunter, where you can just pull entire groups and then nuke them down. And I think the abilities of the Rune-Keeper are the most fun and satisfying in the game. And then Yellow Line Champion is just amazing at doing solo open world. So, and that's also why I think I ranked Captain and Warden down lower, because they just feel the worst to me on a free-to-play account to play in the solo landscape. Now, if you are a player who's wanting to be team-oriented, probably the Captain and Beorning and Lore Master and Minstral are going to be up in your top tier. And also your Brawler and Guardian tanks are going to be huge. So that's my list on the classes of the Lord of the Rings Online.